have to do is we've got to start acting smarter instead of harder, or working, I should say. So what I want to do is I'd like to start this program by showing you a NBC news thing. It's about 11 minutes long. And what I like about it is, if you didn't know how to do counterfeit checks, NBC Nightline just is going to teach you. So without any further ado, I just press play. Oh, that's a wonderful still picture of me. Gee, that's the guy that abused me. Okay. You're on TV, watch it, I'll give you a... Press it. Play. I can hear it. Oh, wrong one. Play. I'm sorry.
You tear up the carbon copies and make sure no one gets their hands on your card number, right? Well, what if we told you that you should be protecting your checks just as carefully? Welcome to the world of finance in the 90s, where your money is in danger from crooks able to make money disappear from your accounts, and there's no guarantee you'll ever get it back. How can you protect yourself? Here's Lee Thompson with a Dateline investigation.
It's like somebody walking up to you and putting a gun in your back saying, give me all your money.
We are out of $120,000.
It's cheap, it's inexpensive, and it's dangerous as hell.
With a PC and a laser printer, anybody can be a bank robber? Anybody.
You know all those exciting and terrifying robberies we see played out on bank security tapes? They're nothing in terms of loot. Well, they're something, about $65 million a year. But the real robbers steal as much as $5 billion a year. They wear nice clothes and don't carry guns. They don't play rough or get out of breath. They simply write themselves a check.
Well, he got me with the point of a pen.
Ruby Gatrell and her husband, Vern Weiss, live in Sylmar, California. She's a nurse.
Spin your tops.
He's a professional square dance caller. They had a comfortable life until January 17th of last year.
I heard the horrible rumble, and I knew instantly what it was.
Ruby and Vern live 5 miles from the epicenter of the Northridge earthquake. 68 homes in their neighborhood burned to the ground. Luckily, their home could be fixed with the help of some big insurance checks, which they carefully deposited into their bank account. But police say that when Ruby and Vern moved into this apartment building during repairs, a computer-skilled check fraud artist living down the hall was watching and waiting and printing. A check counterfeiter was about to strike.
I was going to sit down and write a check to the contractor who was repairing the home, and the lady who was on the phone said, "I'm sorry, you can't do that. You have insufficient funds."
What was your immediate thought when she said, there's not enough money here?
"That's impossible."
And she said,
"Well, let's run over your last 5 checks."
and she did.
And she did. And I said, "They're not mine. I didn't write those checks."
Ruby and Vern's account had been wiped out by 5 counterfeit checks totaling almost $18,000. As a result, their real checks bounced. All their credit cards were frozen, and Vern got stranded on a square dance gig in Alaska. It took almost a month before the bank paid their money back. In the meantime, they had to borrow money from friends just to get by.
There was no way I could get any cash to even buy a pack of gum if I wanted it, much less a tank of gas to go to work.
In fact, the clone checks don't look like your checks at all.
Nothing like my checks. They're not even the same size, not even the same color.
Weren't signed by either you or Vern.
No.
And yet they still went through.
Yes.
Check fraud probably is the #1 way today that the criminals are attacking the financial systems of the United States.
Robert Razor, the head of the Secret Service's Financial Crimes Division, says cheap and powerful personal computers and laser printers have made our checking accounts very vulnerable.
Probably the most significant thing that has happened in this arena is the desktop publishing, computer-generated instruments. It makes it almost impossible in the current environment to be able to tell a good check from a bad check.
And just like Ruby and Vern, anybody with a checking account is at risk. We're going to show you how to protect yourself, but first you have to know how cloning works. We're not about to teach would-be crooks how to do it, but we'll show you enough so you'll realize it doesn't take a genius to be a check cloner.
Let's go into a typical computer room in someone's home or in even a small business. See what
Frank
happens.
Abagnale has a checkered past, and that's more than a pawn. In the early 70s, Frank passed enough phony checks to get him 4 years in prison. These days, banks hire him to advise them how not to get ripped off.
For example, do you have a business card?
Just happen to have a business card
Okay.
because you told me to bring one.
All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your NBC logo. I'm going to transfer that by scanning it into the computer and actually create an NBC check.
We won't tell you what the next steps are, but they aren't terribly complicated, and with less than $2,000 worth of gear, anyone can print checks. And if you put someone else's account number on the bottom of the check, you're a check cloner. So in our attempt to make life convenient at home, we've allowed everybody to become a bank robber.
Well, we've made it a lot easier for every forger.
That is incredible.
This is our finished check.
It looks really just like a real check.
And what is scary is that the average consumer, as well as the average banker and the average corporate chief financial officer, is totally unaware of how simple it is and how much exposure they have.
Big-time cloners go after companies or even cities. Their pockets are deep and they process hundreds, even thousands of checks. Miami Police Detective Sherry Ward.
Checks were very good. The checks were very good to the trained and untrained eye.
In August of last year, Miami wrote 4 refund checks for less than $75. Somehow, a man calling himself Victor Lettieri allegedly got his hands on these small checks and applied a little computer artistry.
These checks were somehow duplicated by this individual into various amounts totaling close to $750,000.
According to police, here's how he did it. After he copied the checks, he changed the amounts, made them out to himself, and deposited them into checking accounts in several banks. They were such good clones they passed several levels of scrutiny. And after they cleared, he started withdrawing cash until a teller spooked him.
And she said to him something regarding to verifying if his funds were okay. And that's when he took an exit out the door, never to be seen again.
The man posing as Victor Lettieri didn't get all of his stolen money out, but police say he did get away with $120,000. It took months, but detectives say they finally discovered his real name, Peter Suarez. After a nationwide manhunt, he was recently arrested in Kentucky.
He's able to do magic with a computer. I mean, magic beyond our imagination.
And who will pay Miami's loss? The bank and the city are negotiating, but in the end, the taxpayer will pay. Because if the bank takes the hit, it can write it off on its corporate income tax. But when it comes to consumers, if a cloner hits your personal checking account, unlike your credit card where the law says you're only responsible for the first $50, with check fraud, there are no hard and fast rules.
If you exercised ordinary care and you reported it immediately, we're going to reimburse you most of the time. But there's no guarantee. There is absolutely no guarantee.
Lisa Wilhelm, a senior vice president at Wells Fargo Bank, says it's strictly up to the bank whether people get their money back. The American Bankers Association says there are no statistics on how many cloning victims have been left holding the bag.
It depends on whether or not you exercised ordinary care. Did you keep your checks in a safe place? Did you look at your statement when it came?
Lisa Wilhelm's bank is where Ruby and Vern keep their money.
And I don't see how we could have been any more careful than we were.
Do you know to this day how this person got a hold of your bank account number?
No. I have checked all my accounts. I have checked all my statements. I have went through every single check. I have none missing.
Police arrested Ruby and Vern's former neighbor, Joe Morris Thompson, who they suspected of having burglarized apartments and mailboxes to get account information. Police say Thompson opened checking accounts under at least 12 different phony identities. And that's the other half of the check cloning game. A cloner has to deposit his phony checks into accounts opened under phony names in order to avoid being caught. As we'll show you, it's amazing how easy it is.
All you need to do is sign.
That's good.
And give me some money, and that's
All right.
There are an awful lot of people out there that don't realize that the system is under attack, that this can happen in basically any bank or any institution in the country.
When we come back, you'll see why your bank may be part of the problem, not the solution. And if you use automatic teller machines to get cash, you'll see another surprising way fraud artists may be moving in on your money.
You've just seen how crooks armed with a computer, a laser printer, and your bank account number can rob you blind. Well, now you're about to see how your bank may be making the bandits' job easier, and why something you do at automatic cash machines might be playing right into their hands. Once again, here's Lee Thompson.
You are looking at a check cloner's dream. That man is making a mistake that thousands of us make every day. More on that in a moment. But before you can understand how dangerous that is, you need to know how a crook launders the money he steals from you.
I think the Achilles heel in the system is the ability to assume someone else's identity.
Forgery detectives we have talked to from all over the country say one of the best ways to stop these fraud artists is to cut them off from opening checking accounts using phony names. But they also say most banks don't want to risk offending their customers by asking too many questions or scrutinizing ID. So we decided to challenge the system.
I can get your driver's license?
My driver's license?
Yes.
Okay.
Using a hidden camera, I opened a checking account. She didn't even remove my ID for a closer look. If she had, she might have noticed I was using a color copy of my real driver's license. I opened 3 more checking accounts. No one caught the fake because no one looked closely.
Hi there.
But since 2 banks did recognize me as a Dateline correspondent, we decided to send in an unknown customer.
1, 2, 3.
Jaro Velez is a Dateline researcher. Banks told us they require new customers to present at least a government-issued photo ID, driver's license, or passport. So we cooked up a bogus ID for Jaro just by using NBC letterhead stationery. Then we sent her off to 4 more banks.
I just need to see 2 forms of identification.
Okay.
This bank accepted our fake plus a voter registration card, which has no photo and could easily have been stolen or forged. The next 2 banks accepted the fake plus an easily stolen or forged credit card. But finally, one bank did the right thing. Almost.
Unfortunately, we need at least a driver's license or a state-issued non-driver's license or a passport.
But watch what happened. Just before Jaro got up to leave, the branch manager stepped in and opened the account.
And again, I apologize you have to wait so long.
Thank you so much.
Bruce Brett is the chairman of the American Bankers Association Check Fraud Task Force and an officer of Signet Bank. Would you open an account with just that kind of identification?
I'm afraid you're going to tell me that you opened them all over the place. I hope not. No, I hope not. But obviously, you can see from the checks that...
4 more banks.
Yeah. I am afraid that the banking industry has strayed too far in the direction of what they consider customer convenience and creating profits for the bank, which is opening checking accounts for people.
If we were check cloners, we now would have 8 checking accounts to launder money through. And all we would need is someone to steal from. Someone with a checking account.
The ability for individual checking accounts to be hit are certainly as high as corporate accounts. You have to remember that the bad guy goes where the money is. And what the bad guy does is looks for account number information.
Where would a crook look? He could go dumpster diving, digging past banana peels and cottage cheese for a carelessly discarded deposit slip or bank statement. But why get dirty hands when many banks and their unsuspecting customers make it so easy? Remember how our story started? It was noontime. Phoenix businessman Brett Ward cruised by his local ATM for a little lunch money. We were watching with a hidden camera. There it is. He just tossed his receipt. He didn't even think about it. He just threw it in the trash. We picked it up and, without telling him why, asked for an interview.
Do you recognize this?
Yeah, it's my checking account. It's my day and night teller receipt.
ATM receipt.
ATM receipt.
Did you know your account number is on that ATM slip?
Not until just now. I never even really thought about it.
Am I making you nervous?
A little bit.
Before Brett arrived for his interview, we had cloned 8 $100 checks on a personal computer using the account number that many, but not all banks print on their ATM receipts. Brett agreed to let us see if the cloned checks would clear his account, and we gave him cash to cover the checks.
I've never seen your signature, right?
No, you never have.
Hi, how are you today? Just fine, thanks. I just want to make a deposit.
The next day, just as a crook would, we deposited the 8 checks we had cloned on Brett Ward's account into the 8 accounts we had opened with our questionable IDs. Would they be caught? After waiting a few days for the checks to clear, we cashed out. Every one of our clones on Brett's account cleared the banks. A surprise? Not if you consider that U.S. banks process an average 120 million checks every single night using high-speed automation.
We all sign our checks vigilantly. Does anybody ever look at those signatures?
No, there's too many checks. There's no way to look at every single check.
If I signed a check, Minnie Mouse, do you think it would go through?
It might. Definitely might.
Because nobody ever sees that signature.
That's absolutely right. It could happen. In fact, we should probably test it and see if it would.
We already had. While banks do some spot checks and scrutinize any check, say, over $25,000, we wondered if this $500 clone on Brett Ward's account with the signature of a well-known rodent would make it through. And a few days after depositing it, Minnie had cleared.
Well, we've got Minnie at the top, one goofy way.
Obviously, nobody ever looked at that check.
Yeah. This is the problem. This is the problem.
Many banks are selling customers expensive high-tech check paper that prints void, void, void all over it if you try to copy it. Will it stop a cloner? Well, in our case, we printed a $1,000 check on that special paper. It said void all over it. We signed it with a nonsense squiggle, and instead of Brett Ward's name and address, we printed, "Please don't pay me. I am a counterfeit check."
And here's the $1,000 to cover it.
I can't believe it, really. I can't believe that the banks are letting, if this goes through, I can't believe it, really.
Well, believe it. It cleared.
Okay, have a good day.
Great. Did you get this one through?
Yes.
It's disgusting. That's too bad. That's too bad. And all we can do is keep trying to push the information out there to make more bankers aware of the problem.
We asked 2 more ATM receipt droppers to join our experiment. Of the 29 clones we deposited, only 2 were caught, both by Citibank, and only because we believe an alert employee recognized my name as a Dateline correspondent. As a real victim of a check cloner, Ruby Gatrell isn't surprised at all by those results, and she knows from experience how hard it is to get the authorities to pay attention when you do get hit, even when the hit is for $18,000.
You never got to put in a police report?
Never. Nobody was interested. I made, 3 different stops and probably 20 phone calls. And I never even got a return phone call.
Ruby's bank, Wells Fargo, was able to get police attention, which helped lead to Joe Morris Thompson's arrest last year. But by the time the prosecutor filed charges 5 months later, Thompson had already been released and had disappeared. But last March, Thompson resurfaced. Police caught him fleeing a bank lobby and say he had 3 more fake IDs.
The bad guys rely on the fact that nobody talks about what they're doing. If everybody talks about what they're doing and understands how they do it, it makes that eminently more difficult for them to be successful.
And Ruby and Vern are doing a lot more than talking. While they did eventually get their money back from the bank, these days they don't write many checks. They pay cash, use credit and debit cards, and carefully check their monthly bank statements. And if you want to find anything with Ruby's account number on it, forget it. It's shredded.
The less paperwork you have at home, the better off you are, because you don't know who's looking.
Once again, just to reassure you, we did not show everything a check cloner needs to know to rip you off. But there are a lot of cloners out there who do know the secrets. So what more can you do to protect your money? Well, first,
Just happy
do not
that
link
saved me.
checking and savings accounts for protection against overdrafts. That way, if thieves do hit your checking account, they won't clean out your savings as well. You can also mail checks at the post office or postal boxes. Leaving them in your mailbox at home with the flag up is like inviting a thief to steal it. And insist that your bank remove, or as some banks have, at least shorten the account numbers on ATM slips. If they won't do it, you can always bank somewhere else.
Well, I think why I bring this video to this program today is to clearly exemplify why in the world would you want to go rob somebody, burglarize somebody, use a gun, and get a good chance of going to jail when this is about money.